recording. Good.
Good.
Yeah, Vince, I can see the people popping in, so I'll admit them.
All right, from now on, I'll let you do that then, and
Okay.
so that I won't get distracted.
All right.
And we'll wait till 7:02, then I'll get started. Well, thanks everyone for coming. I know this is a weird night. We thought, Bob and I, and Jay, that this might be a good interlude in the middle of the summer. Hopefully we'll get a decent number of people here, and we are recording it. So I think we'll get started now. So hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. This all came about when I came back from the event that Sylvia organized to the Boyertown Antique Car Show or Car Museum. And when I got home and sat down to start processing, I thought, wow, this is really exciting. And I've just felt I was learning stuff here, there, everywhere. And I got very excited and was kind of expressing that to my wife and said, boy, I ought to make a talk out of this. Because there was just a number of little things that I was picking up on, some of which I knew but forgot and that kind of thing. And Susie said, well, why don't you do it soon so you don't forget all those little points? So that's how this came about. And there was one series of images that I'll show you that really was the stimulus for this actual happening. And with that, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. So what I propose that I'll do is we'll keep mics open so that people can chime in and get this to be interactive, unlike some of our usual nights when we have an outside speaker. So feel free to just jump in. You won't bother me doing that. And I want to go through first, actually, a very quick slideshow to show you my images. And then I'm going to go into a few comments using PowerPoint. Then we'll go into my Lightroom, and I want to show you some workflow things and then go into some edits. So again, this is from the Boyertown Antique Car Museum, a club-sponsored photo shoot that Sylvia arranged. And these are about 18 or so of the images that I was pleased with. And I'll go through with you my thought process prior to getting there. And I just spotted, despite going over this a lot, something that needs to be removed. So it doesn't matter almost how many times you go through images, you always come back with other stuff. This is the image that started me on this journey tonight, and I'll explain why this got me incredibly excited. When I came home, I decided that, I think I kind of half got the idea while I was there. I did get the idea while there, but did not have it preconceived before getting there. And that was to make some images for the summer challenge by the club, which I think Sylvia instigated and to run. And you can find details about that in the last newsletter, but it's basically taking a series of shots from the same location, same spot, with various focal lengths, and also taking a series of shots from the same spot with different f-stops. And then submit your images, not a contest, just for fun, to our Smug Mug gallery. And that, I thought I would, as I got there, I kind of went on with that theme and put that together and put my submissions in. At the museum, there's an upstairs with machinery from when they previously were actively building and repairing cars and other things. I think that's the last one of that. So we'll come back to Lightroom, but I need to go through some slides with you. I wanted to give you some background thought, some quote academic type stuff. Feel free to interject and tell me if you feel otherwise about certain things. So I set for me for this photo shoot some goals on how I was going to work this project. I wanted very tight compositions. I wanted them to have really intimate details, not just full car images. I was hoping to be able to get some unusual angles and perspectives. One of the thoughts I had was to be shooting down on things and to be shooting along things. Because of those two things, those two thoughts, my lens was 70 to 200 for all of these images. I love shooting at 200 wide open. And I use that quite a bit, and I did on this day. I really was interested in controlling the image by choosing my focus point very exactly, and also choosing the f-stop. And then as that developed, I decided to go through and do a whole series of f-stops, which I do intermittently when I'm shooting as a learning process for me. And I was going to use those, both the focus point and the f-stop depth of field, to help me control the exact detail and to get major subject isolation for many of the shots. That was one of my goals. And this could not be the same f-stop throughout, or the same focal length, or the same focal length, but the same would not be the same f-stop or depth of field, because each of these shots were totally different. My secondary thought, as I mentioned, was the summer challenge, and the newsletter is listed there, July 12. And in my mind, and this is why Sylvia, I think, thought of it, both of these processes, various f-stops, various focal lengths, are really wonderful learning tools. And as I said, I'll intermittently do that as I'm out having fun photographing. I'll do a whole series, particularly of water. One, it's not really predictable sometimes, and two, I just find it very interesting to go through that process and to study the results. So my setup for that particular day, everything was done on the tripod with a full frame mirrorless camera, the Canon R5, and the RF new 70 to 200 f2.8 lens. All the shots were done except for a couple test shots with my circular polarizing filter. The tripod has a ball head for good maneuverability. Rather than a cable release, this day I used the self timer at 2 seconds, so there'd be minimal shake of the camera. The image stabilization was turned off since I was using the tripod. I shot these in the aperture preferred priority mode. I wanted to control the scene with the f-stop. I really could care less about the shutter speed because it was tripod. And my ISO, I tried to keep it as low as possible at 100. Sometimes I snuck up to 200 and 400. None of the images needed any type of noise reduction. The white balance I set for daylight, and you'll see that that was a major challenge because we had probably 3 light sources, artificial plus natural light. So it was a very difficult white balance process. For me, I will often use what Canon calls their expanded autofocus surround, which is the spot meter in the dead center plus 8 spots around. So it's not quite a spot meter. They have one in between. This is the one I often use. Sometimes I'll go to spot, and I have my camera set up for back button focus. Some of these more technical things we can talk about maybe separately to how to set that up, but basically there's a button I've programmed on the camera to say, when I push that, that's what I want in focus. And that disconnects the focus from the shutter release button. I use the evaluative meter, which is what Canon calls it. It's mainly a spot meter in the center. It prioritizes then some surrounding field. So it's kind of a center weighted averaging system. Tripod. As I said, everything was done on the tripod. And for me, the last bullet, I feel that the tripod is a perfect learning tool for people of all skill levels. And why is that? It gave me precise composition, which is what I went into in shooting this. It was great for me in my film days prior to 2013. I've always done very tight compositions. The tripod for me slows everything down and allows me using live view to really study the scene and figure out what I want to do with the composition. I can study what's in the background. It will tell me what to avoid in the background, what I want to include. I really wanted this to have minimal cropping, and the pictures are very, very minimally cropped. Every shot that I take, I level the camera at the onset before I'm dead on with my composition, because it might change it a little bit. I try to emphasize keeping everything in the system square, and you really can only do that, in my mind, with a tripod. That means I look at my subject, look at all four sides of the subject. Is it in the right spot? Am I head on dead square with the subject, or am I off to the left of the center? And now I'm aiming in, and now that will introduce distortion that is very difficult to fix, and sometimes is not fixable. Say, shooting down a cathedral, if you're off center, you're going to have more seen on one side than you will on the other. You can't recover that. I try always to minimize my tilt up or down, but if I do have to tilt, say with a wider angle lens than this 70 to 200, I will always expand the shooting width, because I know that when I want to correct perspective, which I try to do for every shot, if it's a wide angle shot that's tilted, there's going to be a lot of correction there, and you may lose 20, 30, 40% of the image. So I will purposely shoot much wider than I intend to use if I know I'm creating distortion. One of the big things for me at this day was this bullet, to recognize and to manage reflections, glares, and hotspots. It was much worse than I anticipated. I figured it would be an issue. And to me, it was really fun trying to find those problems and correct them. It's very difficult to fix those things in processing, and we'll go over some of that. Photoshop, Lightroom, it doesn't matter what you're using. Fixing major issues like this, it's much easier to get it right by sliding a little bit right or left or up or down, which made a big difference to me repetitively as I set up each of my images. I used the circular polarizing filter indoors. There was a huge amount of glare. The polarizer was a very significant tool, and I made sure with the tripod live view that I was maximizing the effects of the circular polarizing filter. And then exposure compensation. Because of the glare, I realized I needed to do some adjustments. So I set up basically the day to do significant exposure bracketing, all to the negative. And I do manual exposure bracketing. Typically, I don't usually go automatic, because I know I only need to go one direction or the other, or how many stops, and I just do that manually. The tripod gives me very thoughtful focusing and metering, and it allows me to change the focus point without changing anything else, because the camera is fixed. So I know it's not freedom in shooting, but to me, to be able to just sit there and study the image is part of the fun for me. So to bring a couple points home with this, with the tripod, as I study the scene, and this one obviously is in the museum, I'll look at and see, well, where do I want to meter? Which type of metering mode do I want? Which will be best for this scene? And it might change from scene to scene. And this is a view that you would see behind the R5. Right now, the tripod's not level. That's what the redness is for. And I'm looking at the histogram. That's why I wanted to show this one to you, to make sure I haven't gotten too close to the dark side or the bright side and clipped the image, which are non-recoverable areas with no data. And then when the image is brought into Lightroom that I use, you get the histogram to let you see the dark and the light as you've expanded it in your processing, which we'll talk about. Again, any questions, let me know. The focus point was really the main thrust of this session for me, because I wanted my images controlled by what I had in focus and what the depth of field was. And I'll show you this image on my left, which was done at f3.5. Here's the focus point as shown by a plug-in app in Lightroom. So this is where I felt was important for me to be. And my goal with this was to see what happened to the pinstriping. This is the image at f32. I wouldn't necessarily advise people to be shooting at f32, and we'll talk about diffraction in a moment. But f32 is the image that I picked for the slideshow because it gave me the entire pinstriping, which is what I wanted. It, however, compromised my background. This background is significantly better than this background. So you have to decide, do you want shallow depth of field, no background in focus, or do you need a deeper depth of field? And now you have to deal with this. Well, I didn't deal with it properly because it wasn't in my forebrain right then, but I should have focus stacked that to get what I wanted. And we'll talk about that in a moment. I mentioned exposure bracketing or exposure compensation. Again, I do it manually. When I got there, I started with this routine. The neutral point 0. I'll typically go 0, -1, -2, -3. If it's a gigantic exposure bracket, like a sunset without the sun in the picture, I might go -0, -2, -4, and sometimes -6. Here I wanted to get a little more gritty, and I made the focus, the exposure compensations a little tighter. 0, -2/3 of a stop, -1 1/3 stop, -1 2/3, then -2, -3. And I pretty quickly saw I did not need anywhere -2 or -3. The glare just wasn't nearly as bad as that. I tried a couple, then at 0, -1, -2, and I ended up settling for the majority of them 0 and -1. And it was difficult to predict in advance which was going to be the right one. And even after I shot it, I had a difficult time using the live view mode to determine which was the better one. So I just left that for post, and I shot everything just, I think, 0 and -1. Sometimes I took a string at just -1. The exposure bracketing is based on what I see in the histogram. And I starred about 16 non-HDR images, which some of which I just showed you. And just out of interest, of those non-HDRs, half of them were 0, meaning what the meter said, and half of them were 1 stop less than the meter indicated. So it kind of split right down the middle. It was that need for bracketing was determined by the amount of glare and the harshness of the lighting, which was very harsh. And it allowed me to get a properly exposed image to then process, minimizing noise. So this is one sequence following this roll up here. That's how these were shot, from 0 to -3 stops. This sequence only went from 0 and -1, and we'll spend some time on this image in the processing portion. I talked about wanting to set the tone of this session, this photo shoot, with my control of focus and f-stop. And again, this is the image that led me to develop this talk tonight. The subject that you see was 8 feet from the camera. That's in my metadata. It was shot with a 200 millimeter, or at 200 millimeters at the f-stops that you see, the whole range of f-stops. And I saw this, what I had visualized, or when I stood there, what I saw was this thermostat on the front end of an antique car that the driver could see the temperature of his radiator, his or her. And when I took the shot, I saw the bokeh and I just kind of went nuts and on that. And I saw that the chrome disappeared on into the car. I saw the glare and I wasn't happy about that. And there was no way for me to position to make it better than this. It was worse, some positions. But this setup, fine-tuning the tripod set me up to balance the bokeh behind this thermostat, to put some of the bokeh through the window in the thermostat, and to balance the chrome. So I was able to really fine-tune the composition. And I then, as I shot several of the f-stops here, listed here, the bokeh was markedly changing. And I called a couple people over to say, take a look at this. This is really neat. And the bokeh turned out to be from these lights that were strung on an antique diner in the background, which I wanted there. I think it made the image. What I couldn't understand was, what the heck was this? What was going on here? Why was that changing? And it wasn't until I got into post that I figured it out. And I called a couple people over to look at the camera and say, what do you think's going on here? Why is this changing? Why are as I stopped down my lens to 18 and 32, these bokehs back here, these balls were getting brighter as they turned out, as they were getting more concentrated and more in focus. Any thoughts on what this might be that's changing here? Anybody?
It's a reflection.
Yes. And that's the final image after processing, and we'll spend a little time on that, where I got rid of those reflections. But what I hadn't, this is one of the real things that, wow, I've never seen reflections change with f-stop. They probably always have, but I just never noticed that happening. And it really kind of surprised the heck out of me in post when I was working these images. So that first image, copy one on the left, upper left, that ended up being this image, which I was really pleased with. And that's all the f-stop effects that gave me that image. So I told you on that pinstriping image, I really screwed up. I should have focus stacked or focus bracketed, because when I got to get the entire pinstripe in the picture, I needed f32 because I was very close to the car, etc. That messed up my background. This is focus stacking that I did last Saturday at the Reading Railroad Museum in Hamburg. And this is a focus stack of a train, and I'm going to show you 3 examples here. This particular focus stack, all these purple cells, there's 71 shots. And if you do this in camera, you can tell the camera how close you want the slices to be. And it goes from 1 to 10. I picked 2. That's what I've found to work best for me. That means they're very, very close together. And I told it to shoot up to 100 shots to get me from where I was focusing, and the camera will continue firing until it seeks and finds infinity. And sometimes it might be 40, sometimes it might be 70, or the whole 100. I use the ones that have the flags on it to then stack in Photoshop. So this is one of my setups of those trains to give you an idea of the perspective. This is the initial shot, f2.8, and this is the focus point. That's so for all the shots I took, those 71 shots, that was the focus point to start with. And then the camera took slices all the way down, changing the focus point. And I picked 6 of this particular image set or series, and I focus stacked that. And what I wanted was in focus from here to here. I did not want this sharp. I wanted this to fade. And I could have maybe done it at f8, maybe f11. It would be a guess. There was no guess here because I threw away all the images after that one. Another image. I focused right there on that screw, and all I wanted in focus was from here to that handle. In retrospect, I should have started here to give me a little bit of leeway, but I started this image here This is the example of F32. So I'm focused at the same spot right there, but this is way in focus. Doesn't isolate my subject. I didn't want that in focus. I wanted it to stop here. So that's where I threw all the other images away, and stacked the 24 that got me focus from the focus point to where I told it I wanted to stop. And the last one is here. This may show it the best. The focus point on this image was right here, and what I wanted in focus was from this railing to this railing. I did not want the rest in focus. And I don't know how you would do that precisely without focus stacking. You can guess F8, but it's so depending on how close you are and how far away the last thing is. When I shot it at F32 in my sequence, it was in focus. The train's in focus back here, and the trees are pretty much in focus, and that's not what I wanted to isolate. So this was a stack of 14 images focused from here to here, and all these others were thrown away. So what you see here is from the last f2.8 that's focused right there by the camera. And so that's the depth of field from that distance focused here. This is f2.8, but now I have all this foreground in focus. That's what focus stacking does, and I can give a talk separately on that. But again, if you have questions, please speak up, because I'll be
I have a question.
Yes, Jen.
So when your camera does this focus stacking, it's actually moving the focus point back through. Now you're really low here in that first image with the f2.8, that first one that shows the little box.
Yes.
So does it just move at that same point all the way through the image? So, you know, you pointed here, but then you said you wanted that other handle, which is up higher in the image.
And that's that's controlled by the increment, which is 1 to 10 on the Canon R5, 1 being very, very tight, 10 being very, very wide. So at f2.8, I need them tight together. So it's shifting the focus, unscrewing the lens digitally, electronically, unfocusing it, or focusing further and further back. So I actually spoke to the Canon Professional Services and wanted to know if there's any way for me to see where it decided to take a focus for those 71 images, and not in the metadata, and it's not obtainable. And you just have to figure that the slice is, you're just turning the focus wheel of the lens, and it will keep on going until it got the background. It had these trees in infinity at focus. So it will search the image until it finds infinity, basically.
So when you looked at your 72 images and you got to that last one of the 72, the things in the foreground were not in focus.
Exactly. And I'll show you that. I can show you that if you're interested. So yes, I looked at these pictures at 100%. I zoomed it up at 100% once I got close. And then so here to here to here to here. And I knew what I wanted. There was the railing for this shot that was in focus. And the next one, the railing was a tiny, tiny bit out of focus. So that's where I stopped. I didn't go one more. I knew what I wanted in focus, and I stopped there. And now these would be discarded. All these other ones are in purple. They're not needed.
Okay.
So some cameras will do that in camera, but that to me doesn't work, because now the camera is going to give me an F32 equivalent. I don't want that.
Right. So you'd rather take them into Photoshop and have Photoshop do it for you.
Yeah, and it's a piece of cake. And Lee reminded me steps that I keep forgetting. So thanks for that, Lee. So on this one, my focus stack is here. I would have preferred these to be a little sharper. So I learned that I should have focused here and then say, okay, I don't want that. And I throw that away and start with the focus here, but I shouldn't have been so tight. And I got rid of this thing here in Lightroom and things like that. Any other questions on the focus stacking?
Yeah, is it easy to to either do it manually or I mean to switch back and forth between doing it automatically and doing it manually?
Yes, it's you just enable or disable. It's on the counting R5, the red. It's the first one, red number and page 5, I believe. So when you hit the menu, you that's right there, and then you disable it. And I
Okay.
actually did that repetitively. I disabled it, and took a shot of my hand, and enabled it so that I could tell the break in the sequence.
Mhm,
You wouldn't want to use the shot of your hand because then you're going to fire off 100 shots.
Right.
I enabled and disabled it repetitively.
Okay. Very good.
Can we go back to the metering for a moment?
Yeah, we're coming this one here. Or that
No, what we talked about metering. I was driving home from work, so I didn't want to ask then. I wanted to concentrate on driving, but now I'm home.
the
So,
exposure compensation.
yeah. Do you ever just consider shooting to the right? You know, exposing to the
Yes.
right?
Yes, if I'm not doing this kind of experimentation, I will inch my exposure toward the blowout on the right to the overexposure without touching that. That will help me with my shadows, and it will get me as much detail as I can in the highlights. So yes, I do that, but I I may want to do an HDR. So exposure bracketing helps on many tricky types of situations. But
All right,
yes,
I wasn't
for the
I
right
wasn't
thing.
sure whether you were doing this routinely or whether this was just like an exercise.
Both. I will do the exercise on a routine basis. Almost every photo shoot I do, I will do this and the f-stop exercise on a repetitive basis. Because as you'll see in one of my slides, I sit down and study these images in post to say, what was the difference and how am I going to then apply that next time?
Okay. Yeah, I mostly shoot wildlife, so I was just
That would be harder to do that.
clearly,
Yeah.
I wanted to see what you were saying about whether, you know, you were shooting to the right or whether you really felt like trying to get it right in the camera.
Yeah, if I was doing wildlife, I would be shooting to the right, not being able to do that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
that's what I do. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Speak up, anyone with questions. So another point I raised earlier, wanting to control my depth of field. To me, this is extremely difficult without a tripod, and I'll show you why. The depth of field, for those who aren't sure of the definition, is the area that is in front of your focus point, that little square I showed you, that box, and the area behind that focus point that, and this is the official wording, that appears acceptably sharp. So is that acceptably sharp for me on my iPhone, or acceptably sharp for Julie on her iPad, or for Lee on a 32 or 27-inch monitor? Is it acceptably sharp for a 16 by 24 print? What's acceptably sharp mean? And it means, by definition, an uncropped 8 by 10 print viewed at 1 foot. That's the Japanese, and that's the manufacturers in Japan determined the definition. That's acceptably sharp. Well, that's depending on your monitor resolution and size, how much you've zoomed and cropped the image, how far away are you viewing, how's your eyesight, what's the f-stop, and if you went too far with the f-stop, how much diffraction have you introduced? And I'll talk about that in a minute. And there are other things that affect depth of field and sharpness. There are 2 controllable variables that you need to be aware of. The camera will allow you to change the crispness or clarity of your image. Most cameras, digital cameras, will do this under the picture style and the clarity setting. Almost everyone says don't touch
That's
them.
only for RAW though, right?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, only for JPEG, I meant.
No. No. It's raw.
No, you can change that and get a different RAW.
So It's a preset in the camera. Leave it at default. And when you bring your image in, at least the Lightroom has a preset for their sharpening, and this is the preset from Lightroom. Some people will talk about changing these presets to their favorite, etc. You can certainly do that, but do it with great trepidation. So leave it at the default. And was that Jackie who asked the question about RAW versus JPEG?
Yeah, I thought that the picture style and clarity and the sharpening stuff only applied to JPEGs
I don't think so on
in
the
camera.
R5. I don't think so, but I could be wrong on that.
I think you are.
Well, I'll have to look that up.
Yeah,
The depth of field what's that, Val?
it doesn't apply to a RAW. When you look at it in Lightroom, you'll see the JPEG as you shot it, but then you might notice it pops a little and then
Yes.
it doesn't look the same. Then you're back to your original RAW. So you
Okay.
can as a guide, but it actually isn't affecting the RAW, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I'm not sure I read that in the R5 manual. But we'll confirm that. The depth of field varies greatly by the distance to your subject, the focal length of your lens, the sensor size. There are a lot of things that vary it. But here's the point I want to get to. You can do a depth of field calculation using photo pills either on your phone or a more exacting one on the website. So plug in the Canon R5, shooting at 200 millimeters. And my subject that I'm going to show you was at 10 feet by my camera's metadata, f2.8, and here's my depth of field range in inches. So 120 inches would be 10 feet. So the far end of the far plane of the in this scenario would be 3/4 of an inch behind the focus. And the near field would be less than 3/4 of an inch in front of the focus point. To me, if I was wanting to be dead on exact, you can't hold the camera that steady, particularly a 200 millimeter lens and a full size camera. So you'll see what happened even with a tripod.
So, Vince,
Yes.
how do you know how much in front of the photo versus and how much is in back? Is that
Well, this is the table. The table is set up to calculate depth of field near and far planes from your focus point.
oh, so you know you're 10 feet away, and then so this is going to give 9 feet 11. Yeah, okay, I see what it is. Okay, that's fine. So
Right,
10.
so you have less
you're-
than
either
3/4
side
of
of 10. Okay, okay, I'm fine.
yeah, so less than 3/4 of an inch back and forth. The
Right.
old rule of 1/3 in front, 2/3 in back holds for only very specific scenarios and is not good enough to say, oh, I got 1/3 of my space in the front and 2/3 in the back. That doesn't work.
Okay.
Vince, just to answer the previous question about RAW and JPEGs, the R5 can process RAW images, but it changes them to JPEGs. So it doesn't in-camera process changing the RAW image to a JPEG. So you can alter the clarity, but it does change from RAW to JPEG.
Okay, thank you, Lee. And thank you, Lee, for this one. Lee ruined one of my shots for me when I showed it to him. And he said, your Dodge symbol in this 1930-ish Dodge Brothers car was not crisp. And I said, that's impossible. But he was dead on. 200 millimeter lens, f2.8. Here's my focus point. Using that focus, that center weighted spot meter type thing from exactly 10 feet away, solid on a tripod. So apparently the Dodge symbol is more than is farther away than 3/4 of an inch.
More than 3/4 of an inch, yeah.
Yeah. So here it is zoomed 100%, and the emblem is not sharp, and I was really annoyed that happened. And you'll see in the processing, I played with it in Topaz to try to crisp just the this part up, nothing else. The Topaz sharpen AI, and it worked. And I sent it back to Lee, and Lee said, "That's still not sharp. What you do?" And he's again right. It wasn't perfectly sharp. If it's not sharp, you ain't going to make it sharp. So what I came away from with this is that this box, when you're shooting f2.8 or less, and you want stuff in focus, this is probably not good enough. It probably should have been spot meter on that bolt.
Yeah.
It may have been affected by the depth of this glass, which was maybe 1/8 of an inch back. So f2.8 with you, if you want anything in focus beyond it, probably should be spot metering, but that becomes very tricky. It's a lot harder to use a pure spot meter, 1% spot, than it is that box with 8 dots around it. But that's the solution, and I want to further that here. So how do we think about sharpness? What can affect the sharpness? And most of you probably all know this, but the quality of your lens is obviously one thing. The f-stop is really important. And this experiment with shooting at f2.8, which I do a lot. A lot of my shots are 2.8. The lens, every lens has a sweet spot, and the sweet spot is typically 2 or 3 stops from wide open. And these are stop changes. This is 2.8 to 4 is one stop, 4 to 5.6 is another stop, 8 to 11. So for most 2.8 lenses, it's going to be somewhere around here is the sharpest, technically sharpest spot of your lens. But now I've suggested considering f32, but then I said to get good depth of field, but I said, well, be careful with that because of diffraction. So as the lens stops down and gets smaller and smaller pupil size, the rays coming in start to bounce and bend around the diaphragm blades of your shutter. I'm sorry, not the shutter, the F-ring, the diaphragm ring. And as those light rays coming in hit the diaphragm ring, it causes the light to scatter and diffract. And then the actual light waves interfere with each other. It causes an overall image sharpness. Decreasing overall image sharpness, the image gets softer. And it's not an instantaneous thing, it's a gradual thing. It generally will happen with every camera, every lens beyond f16. Some of the combinations of camera and lenses, it will happen at f8 if you really pixel peak. So you have to decide what's the trade-off. Do you need the depth of field? Or do you want to stop down to f22 because you want to get a slow shutter speed to moving water without using a neutral density? But be aware that the compromise or the balance point is an issue of diffraction and overall strangeness happening with your focus and softening of the focus. Ken, you had your hand up?
I think it was Bill Martin who had his hand
Oh,
up.
Bill, you have your question.
No, I didn't.
Okay. So then we'll move on. The ISO, I think, is a thing that we often forget. As you increase your ISO, the image becomes softer. Again, it's a balance. You need the ISO. You have to be aware that you're going to affect your sharpness overall of your image. Obviously, camera shake will affect the sharpness, subject movement, etc. So this is one that surprised a few of the people who were on our shoot, and I did show some people this. This was the very first setup I did, and I took it without my plan was polarizer, but I took it without the polarizer and with the polarizer. The exposures are the same. These are both unprocessed images, raw files. And if you can see, I hope it shows on Zoom, the difference in the glare effect here. This is the hot floor that was causing me to -1 expose things. And I have one other example of the polarizer. The polarizer helped get rid of a lot of the lights, not all of them. This is without the polarizer. This is the raw image, unprocessed. This is with the polarizer. I got rid of this one light just about. I got rid of that, almost got rid of this. I had positioned myself such that made it as good as it could be by positioning. Curiously, this got sharper. And it has to depend, it depends on the angle that's coming of the light coming into the polarizer. It maximizes at 90 degrees. So you can't get all the reflections with the polarizer. And we'll see how I got rid of some of those subsequently. And I'm just about done now. The last couple slides is just to go over what I do in Lightroom for my workflow. I do keywording when after I've entered things in, I'll group them and do keywords. I will make several passes through my images to cull them down. On the first or second pass, I will give I will give a 1 star to those I think are worthy of my working on them. I might later get rid of the 1 star. I rarely will do a 2. It's an image I think, man, this is going to be a good one. I don't give 3, 4s, and 5s at that time. Occasionally, not infrequently, I'll have to crop an image to see, is this going to actually work for me? Does it do what I want? I'll occasionally have to do a little bit of exposure adjustment to see, does it work or not? So I do spend some time processing before I get rid of images. I will sit and compare like stuff, like where's the focus point on this image versus this? What's the depth of field? How have I isolated my image, my subject from the background? These are things, thought processes I go through as I call my images. I'll put an X or black flag on those I'm going to delete. I do not delete until I'm done.
Can you back up when you say looking for the focus point? You mentioned some sort of a plugin that you use to see the focus point.
Yes.
Will you be telling us what that is?
I'll show you that when I
Okay.
actually, so I don't forget. Let me see if I can find it, Jen. I'll look under apps and it's focus something or other. There it is. Focus points. How about that? Lightroom
Wow.
plug.
That's a really hard name to remember.
Yeah, and it's free.
Focus points plugin for Lightroom.
Yes.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
Focus point.lr plugin.
Mm-hmm.
You can also do it on the Canon app. If you go to Digital Photo Professional 4, you can on the info tab ask for the focus point and it will give it to you. This comes with all Canon cameras.
Okay.
So I'll black flag, which is you hit the X key in Lightroom. The ones I want to delete, I do not ever delete them until I'm done selecting through my photos. I will white flag some. You saw that on the focus stack. I white flag my HDR and pano series, so I know what went with what. I'll occasionally do colors. If I have a series of panos and I want to isolate this pano from this pano, I'll color them differently. And as you'll see tonight, if they have similar, if it's a series with different f-stops or shutter speeds or whatever, I'll group them in colors. I do make comments in my Lightroom library so I can see what I've done later. And this is my metadata, which is customized in Lightroom, where I will list if I've used generative AI, the new Lightroom remove tool, if I've used Photoshop generative fill or expand, or if I've used Topaz sharpen or denoise. They go into my user comment field, which is part of the customization. You can pick what you want to go in there. And then I will try to study all those images to figure out what have I learned? What do I do better next time? I mentioned I do have to crop some. Cropping is important for me. Is the image going to be salvageable or not? So as I'm now into my workflow, I've now culled down. I have images I've decided to work on. I crop very early in my process. I don't want to do a whole bunch of processing and then find out the crop stinks. I can't fix it. So that's one of the first things I do. I level every single image from the very start. It drives me crazy when they're crooked. And if I have to fix a crooked image, I may cut off a piece that's very important. And the same thing for perspective adjustments. I am very diligent with that. I do it early in the game, again, because I may have to lose a third of the image to fix a bad perspective, and now the image is no good. In the actual digital processing, white balance is one of the very first things I then hit before I do anything else. I set my white and black points. I happen to use the tone curve to do that. I believe it's more accurate. I do almost no global adjustments anymore with all the new Lightroom masking. Almost everything is done selectively. I do some adjustments, but you'll see some of my images have 8 to 22 masks. Almost all of my images will get a very hopefully non-scene vignette at the end of my processing. I'm very quick to use virtual copies, which is an identical of what you've just copied, so I can then change it to say black and white or do other stuff. And with that, I'm going to move into my Lightroom catalog. Questions, anybody? If you have any comments on how we can do this better, let me know as we go along. If you want me to slow down or speed up or less detail, feel free to speak up. So this is my catalog. Of my from this shoot, Boyertown Car Museum with BPS, and you can see the colors, the groupings, the flags of HDRs, and we'll see how this works going through this. So this first series, that's the circular polarizer. I would then go through this. I said I would mention how I call this through. So I'll look at this series, and then I changed it a little bit with this series. Oh, went too far. I changed the distance and the zoom a little bit for this these 3 images. So now I'm going to say, okay, between that and this, which do I like better? Go back and forth a few times, and I picked this one and started. In reality, I would then put a black flag on this one, but what's going to happen if I do that tonight is it darkens the a black flag will darken the image when I in certain modes. So I did not black flag any of these for getting rid of them. So now between these similar pictures, I've picked this one because I like the way the depth of field was at f8. I like the exposure of the other ones that were similar. I liked it better than this other setup. Then I'll go on to my next series, and these are the first 4 that I did. And then, sorry, these are the first, hold on a minute. Sorry about that, number 7. So I have 7 to 14. I have all these in green. These are all similar images, these guys. So now I will sit down and look at them. These are exposure brackets, and you can see down here under the customization, I have exposure bias. EF is 1 stop. Basically how much extra exposure. This is a minus 2/3. A minus 1 1/3 down in the lower right, and go through here and then determine which one I'm going to work on. And it turned out to be this particular one that I felt was the proper image for me to work on. It's similar to this one, but I changed the positioning somewhat, which is why I picked that image over, say, this one. I'll show you how I can compare the 2. And now one's been cropped. The one with the star has been cropped as a final image, but you can see the perspective is different with these images. And I'll do that compare field to try to decide of these, say, 8 images or so, this is the one I happen to pick that I like. This particular series, there's just a couple in here, actually 2. This one, and this is the raw, so the unprocessed. So let me compare these two. See if I can do that. This was one of my experiments. This is with the polarizing. This is without. I think we'll spend a few minutes processing this in a bit. And my final image of that is this guy. That's where it came from. It ended up after it was white balanced, etc.
Vince,
Yes.
can you use more than one polarizing filter to screen out multiple reflections?
No, they negate each other.
Oh, okay. I guess
So-
that's the challenge. I mean, the lighting it's like a warehouse. The light's coming from a bunch of spotlights.
Yes, plus natural light. So no, I slid back and forth, up and down, keeping the composition acceptable, and then maximize the polarizer. And that's the best you can do, but you'll see how we got rid of some significant reflections when we get to that point. So again, another series. So this is slide 21, and this is a series of changing f-stops and going from 0 to -1, which you can see down here on the exposure. So that was that's my final image from that. But this is the sequence. We're up to 5, F5, F8, F18, F32. So I would not be using F32 generally speaking for a shot like this, but I can look at this and see the background's ruined. It's nowhere near what I wanted. At F5.0, it's pretty good. And here is the image fixed, processed at F2.8. The background's totally out of focus, and it's had a pretty significant adjustment to it.
So if you had to do it over, Vince, would you focus stack these or not?
No, because I've decided on this one, I wanted just this front in focus. If it was such a shot that I wanted to get the entire, like the decal shot, in focus, then I would potentially focus stack. I could focus stack from here to the windshield, say. I could have done that, Steve. That would work if that's the vision I had.
Exactly, yeah. That's
But
what
for
I'm-
this shot, I wanted the headlights.
Yeah, okay.
This also is an example of square. I'm dead center, right to left. And I fixed the top and bottom dimensions where I wanted it done.
Mhm,
And that's, again, part of the tripod bit.
mhm.
I was planning that this would go probably 90 minutes, just to let you all know. If you have to leave, that's fine. It's being recorded. Let's see. Let's go to the series 28. Yeah. So if we look at this series, I want to compare. These are done at 200 and let's see, 200 and various f-stops. We're up to f5.8 or f13. The f-stops are up here. The exposure compensation is down here. You can see what happened here at f32. I was interested in the front. I actually didn't like any of these, and I moved on to a different series because I liked it better. So none of these were selected. They have no stars. While we're here, I'll show you this. This was kind of the lifesaver. I took images so I knew what the car was of each grouping. I had a very difficult time selecting white balance. This was daylight. That's how this image came in. And I played with it. I thought I had gotten the proper white balance from adjusting, taking the eyedropper and things, and it turned out that that was about 4,200 or 40, yeah, about 4,200 Kelvin. Then I said, let me try auto, which I effectively never use the auto settings up here, but for white balance, auto sometimes works pretty well. And it turned out that going to auto white balance and gave me this temperature, which was 3,800. I then did a sync of this slide to all the other slides. So I'll show you how I would do that. So this is the one I'm going to use as the master. I'll click with my command this one, or I could do shift and get all of them. Now I'm going to go and say sync from the master image to this image, sync. What do I want to sync? I don't want to sync everything that's possible. All I want to sync is the white balance, which is somewhere up here, white balance. So now when I hit synchronize, it will put every image that I've highlighted matching the same white balance, which was turned out to be 3,800. And I use that throughout all the images for my final image. Again, deciding is the f-stop what I want? Is the exposure, the histogram, which one works better for me? This one's -2, I think, and it's clipping over here. That's all pure black. The thing that just showed up blue, there's no detail there, and so that might be okay for some shots, and it wasn't here. Yes.
Just keep me posted. I guess that's all we can do.
So this is the next series. If whoever that is can mute, that would be helpful. So this is the series. I didn't choose anything from here. And I think you get the message. Let me go through this bit here. As one of the last series we'll go through. So this is 2.8. I have this squared up exactly perfectly as I wanted it, right to left, top to bottom, it's level. And that's my finished image. So this is the unprocessed same 2.8.
That too? I could go
5.6, 9. These are all -1. F16 and F32. Great lights if that's what you wanted at F32. But we got all this junk in the background. So I went through all those and decided that's my image. That's what I'm going to stick with. I then changed the zoom. This is at 70. This is at 111. And this is at 200. With the non-sharp dodge symbol. And even under topaz sharpen, it still wasn't perfect. That dodge is not clear.
I'm just hanging. Vince Pellegrini is having that talk.
I hope he doesn't say something bad, whoever that is. Bob, if you can mute that person, please.
I can't.
You can't. Okay.
Could you briefly show how you change the white point and black point using that tone curve?
Yes. Who is that, Jackie? I don't see the
Jackie,
people.
yeah.
Yeah, I will show that shortly.
Okay.
This is the last sequence. This is the this is where I went too far and would focus stack nicely now with this one, 3.5, 6.3. Watch the background. F18 and F32. I got the pinstriping, but the background's ruined.
Talk to you later then. Bye-bye.
We saw that sequence, and I think I'm going to stop there with the sequencing. So tell me what was that question again? Was it for white balance?
Yeah, no, for selecting the black point and white point with the tone curve. You mentioned it earlier in the
yes.
talk.
Yeah. Okay. We'll jump to that. I hope that gave you a feel on how I call down the images and what I'm doing to study my images. So let me pick one that maybe needs some adjustment. So these are all pretty well exposed. I'll pick this one just randomly. Right now, the black is clipped. You can see all the black that is now blue. There is no data there, and you can't recover that, so I can't help that. But I might be able to brighten this up some without getting clipping over here. And I go down to my tone curve, press my mouse in, hold along the top, not down, not let it drift down, and then slide over.
Oh,
But you can see what I've done. I've way over brightened it. So now I have all the red, that's all blown out. Now I might say I'll sacrifice that for the rest of it, but that certainly is not what you would want to do, typically speaking. But that's how I adjust the tone curve. I'm looking to see if I have one that needs more correction.
You do that over using the option key and moving the sliders.
Well, you can use the option key if you want to see what's happening as you're moving. But I'm watching my image and I'm watching the histogram as
Okay.
I hug the top and slide it over, and now it's about the brightness I want, but now I'm way over clipped, so I'm going to back off a little bit and say, okay, that's where it belongs. Your
Okay.
other option is to use the sliders here.
Yeah, that's what I always do.
Yeah, so you can hold the option key down, and now you can see what's blowing out. So you would adjust this until those sparkles are not quite there using the white key and the black key. That's blown out. I generally don't use that. I use the tone curve.
Yeah, I don't know how to use the tone curve well, so I appreciate you showing me that.
Yeah, it's felt to be more accurate. Yes.
You can also put your pointer up on the histogram, and there are bands, gray bands. And for the highlights, if you move across to the right, there's a narrow white band there, which you can click on and then just move it backwards and forwards. That way you're watching the histogram at the same time as you're altering the exposure.
Mm-hmm. So you can do it from up in here, is what Lee
Yeah.
said, like that.
Yeah.
That's
And then
helpful.
you grab the middle and shift the mid tones.
Yeah, I do that. That's the way I do it often.
Anyway, just another way of killing the cat.
Yep. Okay. Questions up to that point? Are we all okay for me to continue a little bit longer? Do some development, a couple things in the development module?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's find slide 32. 35. Oh, I did that one. 3868. Go. So this has not, I did not necessarily sync I wanted to keep the raw unprocessed images to let you see what these are looking like. So this one has the daylight white balance. And not what I decided on to be the ideal white balance, which was 3,800. Which is this one. This one has the 1 star. So this is 3,868. So if I could sync it to the one that's fixed, but I know I want this to be at 3,800, so I can just type that in, 3,800. So now I've affected the coloring, got rid of the yellow in the grill. Do you see that? And the headlight. What I thought I would do is to show you some of the newer AI tools, the spot removal tool, and some of the masking as I myself would do it. So the image I selected, which was this one, this was F18, and what was the exposure compensation? -1. And this is the one that I then processed. This is a virtual copy. That's what this indicates, to show you what the unprocessed image was, and that's the final edition. So this took quite a number of masks to work on, 5, and they're displayed here with these little dots. There's the mask area. So if we look at mask, see if I can show this. Oh, I think I may have turned that off. Yes, I turned mask 1 off. So this is mask 2. And I did this with the object selection tool. And I told it, okay, pick the headlight, pick the front grille, pick this, pick that, and I added them together. And I'll show you how we did that. I picked that as an object selection, this thing up here, and the Royal in the lower middle left as an object selection tool. So let's look at some of those under the, say, this image. It's 3,800. We'll open the mask up. Object selection. Make this a little bigger using the bracket key, or you can use the thing here. And I'm going to paint this. And that should give us the headlight. Now I want to add to that selection because I want to treat these kind of the same. You don't have to add to it. You can just use that and as one thing, one mask. But the effect I want to be the same. So object. Now I'm going to select this. Doesn't have to be exact. Sometimes it works really well like this. See if it does that. And it did. And now I want to add to that selection object and do this. I'm going to decrease my size a little bit. And I'm going to stop there. And not so good. We're going to add to it with a brush. Another object selection, but I'm going to make the thing smaller. Now I'm going to go through that. And I did what I didn't want to do, which was to hit the light. So we'll see what Lightroom does with that. Sometimes it has trouble if it's dark like it is here and there's not a lot of contrast. It has trouble. So now to add to that, I'm going to use a brush. And now I can just paint that in as an object. I'm adding to the selection of the mask. Now let's add to that, see if I can get that symbol up here as a brush. I'm sorry, as an object. Make it smaller. Might have trouble because it's still a little dark up there. That did pretty good. So now we can say, all right, let's cut the highlights down. Let's brighten them up. Maybe give it a little bit of texture. And say that looks pretty good. What I do for my lights is almost every light, I'll adjust that, not with a brush. Let me make another mask. Do an object of the light. I screwed that one up. We're going to get rid of that mask because it will do better than that. Object. My mouse got stuck as what happened. I'm not using which is trackpad. So that did that pretty well. So now I'm going to my little trick with lights, be the house lights, street lights. I'm going to increase the whiteness to it. Increase the brightness a little bit, maybe change the temperature, make it a little colder. So that's what I will often do with lights. I want to get rid of some of the reflections. So let's try the generative. For the Lightroom calls us now remove, and you can either use generative AI, which goes to the cloud, or use the previous remove tool, which doesn't go to the cloud. So if you check this off, now you're going to the cloud. Whether you need that for everything, I don't know. It's very, very variable, as it turns out. So I don't like that hotspot right there. And this would probably be hard without the generative fill AI. And now you have to hit apply, see how it does. Takes a moment, usually about 15 seconds. And now that looks pretty good, but it gives you 3 options up in the upper right here. And you can kind of pick the one you want. That one looks even better. So I'll stick with that. I'll go to a new spot. You have to go over it a little bit because it needs to be able to read what it's looking for to match. So that's the spot. I'm going to hit apply. And that looked pretty good, but let's left a little bit of markings there. Let's see what the 3 choices are. That was worse. Even worse. We'll go back to the original. I'm going to say, I don't like any of them. Do that again. Hit the refresh. There's it sometimes works a lot better than others. Once you get rid of it, it's gone. It will start over with a totally new one. And then sometimes I found that I unchecked the generative AI and the right, that's not too bad, but I can see that removal. So I don't like any of those. So I'm going to go back in the history.
Vince, what do you mean when generative AI goes to the cloud and something else doesn't?
Right. So in the remove, when you're using generative AI, you need to be connected to the web and the server up in the, excuse me, the Adobe server is doing the heavy lifting here. And when you say get rid of it, I don't want it, you cannot regenerate the exact same thing. So say it was building a fence. You can't get that exact same fence post back again because it's new every time. But if I don't want to do generative AI, which would make it not applicable to our camera club's competition, which is why I have it in the comments, that's unclicked. And now this is the old-fashioned type of removal. And indeed, it did it better than generative AI. And that's, I find, it's a little hard to predict sometimes. So the question is, how much of these do you want to remove? I don't want to remove them all. I do want to remove bothersome ones. So I'll go through that. And let me see if I can get you a feel for where you might want to, like here. This one's going to be a little difficult, I think, to use without the generative fill, but we'll try this with generative. Oh, it's going back and doing a previous one, and it brought that in. I should have shut that off because I wanted to start new generative AI. Let's try to get rid of this area here. And it will build that grill through the cloud server. You need to be on the internet. And you'll never get it back again once it's gone. So that's one.
Unless you undo that.
Well, I've deleted it by
Oh,
starting.
you mean if you choose not to use that one? I see what you mean.
Yes. So now I'm on the left side, I'm going down in my history. And now as soon as I do something else, that above history is
Right.
gone.
Right.
And I
Now,
can't make it do that again.
when you were in that generative AI, there was a choice to either add or remove. And you were saying add, not remove.
This tool is renamed the remove tool.
No, I know, but when you picked the generative AI, I don't know if you can make that come back again. There were two
Yeah.
little boxes. One said add. See up there where it says add or subtract? And what if when you click on add, it's adding something. If you click on subtract, it removes the unwanted area from your selection. Put add, it's adding something in.
With
But both of them are using the cloud, as you see there.
Yes, I know, but I mean, I think you might that one where you had something weird being added in. I think it was you had the add.
No,
Yeah.
Jimmy, with that gives you that opportunity to then choose another tool. Like you could add a brush and then add to the mask, like add to the mask with a brush or object selection or whatever. It's
Oh.
allowing you to add to that mask.
But when he moused over it, it's okay. All right, that's fine. I get it, I guess.
If we're looking at the same thing, I had looked away.
So I don't like any of this, for example. That's add and apply. So Val, I'm not sure how you add with another, I guess I can tell it to
We're
add.
not talking about a mask, adding a mask. This is in with using the remove tool. Like, can you mouse over the word add? What does the tooltip come up and say? It doesn't say anything.
Oh.
Mouse over the word subtract. Yeah. See how it
Remove
says?
unwanted, and this is probably adds something. I don't know. Let me go from here to here.
Yeah, my mistake. I was talking about a different thing.
Yeah.
A regular
Much
mask.
to
Yeah.
refine the selection. So you're adding to that selection, that's all. Oh. Well, here you go. I've never done that, Val. It's that, oh, that's subtracting. Oh, okay. Yes, I have done this. So I'm adding to it.
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking too. My brain is.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now I said, I went too far. I don't want you to do that.
I see. Okay.
And now apply it and see if it builds the headlight. And you might not like that, and I don't. So and sometimes you have to do sections. So yeah, that part looks good. Now I'm going to do this part. And you work it through.
Mm-hmm.
The piece that it's putting in there is a lower resolution than your image.
That's right.
It's about 1050, I think. I forget the exact 1020 pixels at this moment in time. And probably what's going to happen is they're going to charge you a fee to get higher resolution, and you'll get X number, like 30 a month or something of these gens. That's where the process is going. Let me show you a different image. 3870. Were there other questions while I'm looking for my next image? So this is this one's kind of neat. Watch this. I want to show you this. This is the raw image 71. Yeah, okay. So I chose this one, the 2.8, to minimize the background, etc. But this is close to it. But this is pretty neat. If I use a mask and object selection, and I want Royal. Now it worked before. Let's see if it works. Yeah. I'm going to add to it. And notice with an object, I'm just going all over the green paint. And it picked the color, the luminosity and the contrast, and picked Chrysler Royal. And now I can bring that up a little bit, decrease the highlights. I can do whatever I want with it. Play with the texture on it, and selectively change the temperature of it, make it more white if I wanted to do that. But the masking tool with object is really pretty phenomenal. We'll get another tool, mask with the object and mask the headlight again. Picked it pretty well there. If I want to make something brighter, I tend to go to white first, see how that does, then increase exposure and make it bluer, or the temperature colder, make it look more like a highlight and then a headlight, and then get rid of this stuff. 3916. So this is one I gave a 2-star for myself for. And what I picked as my base image, f2.8 and 0 EV, 0 exposure compensation. And there's quite a number of masks in here. This one has 22 masks.
Wow.
And they're all because of little tiny things, little things around that I was adjusting selectively, not globally. So this is how it came in. That's the white balance effect. The cropping is for these that's the cropping right there. These had almost 0 crop. Let's see, what do I want to show you on this? The shadow adjustments, it's all kind of the routine thing, but I do them all as very selective masking. And obviously this image took quite a long time to get to this point. Let me look at one more, trying to speed this up as we're getting a little late now. I can stay late, but I don't want to drag you guys through a whole bunch of stuff. 952. This was not meant to be a processing demo type of thing. 3952, as opposed to more of a workflow. If you have questions about what I'm doing, certainly speak up. So this one, I got to this. Let's look at where that started from. And this had actually only 2 masks to it. Came into there, white balance change, and then I started getting rid of the reflections. So let's work on some of those reflections. Let's go to the image that is the matching image. It's a virtual copy. We'll set the white balance at 3800. And this is a fair amount of work for removal to be doing. Try it without the generative fill, just to see in segments. I don't think this worked, not generative, yeah, without the generative fill, just the removal, not too bad. If there's a contour, it might, like it's messing up that contour a little bit. Contour in the metal might make it more difficult for, yeah, and that's screwing that up. So let me go back and turn that off and on and click off generative. Give it a little bit of material to work with to know what it's substituting and see how it does with that. And I played with this using the generative remove tool in segments until I got the ones that I wanted out gone. That's pretty decent. So the area, depending upon how big this patch is, might show up if I do a big print.
Do you
Because-
find this superior to using Photoshop?
Yes. To me, I do. Was that Jackie who asked that question?
Yes.
Yeah. That didn't work so well. I can see where that was. It's very similar to what's in Photoshop. It's just that it's easier for me not to have to go over there. Refresh, I didn't like any of those. So I may have done too much. I may have to go back. That one's not too bad, but I can see a color change, so I'll go back. And how far back does it want?
I kind of like the clone stamp tool for some of this kind of stuff in Photoshop.
Uh-huh.
I found that some images Photoshop does a better job. If I don't get it right in Lightroom with remove, I'll go across to Photoshop.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
And you know what? There are rare times where neither of them work, and I go to my old, that's interesting. It failed because it was not enough contrast for it. I'll go to my old Luminar.
Yeah.
And bango, with one moment in Luminar, it's gone, and it's fantastic sometimes. So that's the deal for that one. So we're at 8:30, and I think I covered a fair amount of what I wanted to cover. We could go a lot longer, but I think that was pretty much it. Anyone have questions with HDR? I did do one HDR of a car, actually. Suffer with me for another one. This one's pretty good. Let's pick this one, because that's similar to the one. This was my finished image. Real quickly for the object selection. See how well it does that. I was too sloppy with that. As I'm trying to go too fast. But the object selection really typically works very, very well in filling in things. And then say I want to now increase the exposure there. I fixed this. This was one of the things I wanted to show you. That was a pretty bad glare. And I got a selection that matched the wood grain really nicely. So it broke it right there. That didn't work. So we'll try again. There we go. So now I say that's the absolute perfect one, but then I decide now I don't like that anymore. I'm going to get rid of it and move on. And then I want to try to get that back. You don't get that back. On this particular image, it will be different every time. So I'm going to, I've made this selectively, and this is why I end up with so many masks, because I'm individualizing the components on how I'm going to fix them. So I'll increase the whites, increase the exposure a little bit, maybe add some texture, and emphasize some of that pitting that's in the chrome. Then select, let's try with the color mask, the red. And try to restrict it to just that headlight or that tail light, and then brighten the tail light some. So I do a lot of those individualized masks in my processing.
Is that color red thing, is that within a mask, or is that just
Yes. So here's the mask button.
yeah, how did you do that?
The mask
Jackie
button.
did.
And under the range color. and
Oh,
This is the color. So then it's it'll pick things that somehow have that color in them. So there's other things like the wood has it. So I can subtract that, or I could try to refine it, or refine the selection, so I can slide this down until the wood no longer shows it. And then I think has most of that light. Another way to see what it's doing, if you click next to the color, I happen to choose red, not good for that light. You can do white on black. Now
Vince-
that tells me that I can pick this down here.
Vince, you already selected the object, and if you use intersect with and the color range, it'll only pick up the red on the tail light.
Yeah, but I didn't do it this time with the object select at all, Lee. But
I thought
yes,
your object selected the tail light. That's what I was.
I had not this time,
Ah,
but
Okay.
I'll come back to that. So I want to, you can, when you use black on white, you can see where the mask bled somewhat. I'll go back now to the color overlay and now increase the exposure, and it's only affecting that one area. And it could be this green area or this area. So if we get rid of that, and select object, as Lee suggests. So that's the object. And I decide, I really only want the redness done.
Three
Well,
buttons. Yeah.
Intersect with red.
Color.
And then that color. Now, some of that color is bled onto the chrome. We'll refine it that way. And then we can brighten it that way. So you refine the mask by doing intersect with the other thing that you want. And the very last thing, I just want to see if there's anything of value in the HDR for you. I think it was the red car with the HDR. Well, these are I don't know where the red car one. Oh, this one. Here we go. Generally speaking, you don't need to do HDR if you're only using a value of 0 and -1. Usually it has to be multiple stops, exposure values away. But this was the 0 compensation, and that's the -1 compensation. And I did that because of the headlight. And you'll see what I did. The mask is pretty interesting in the headlight. I think the headlight has 18 masks in it, but there are 3 in the headlight, the light bulb, and then the whole headlight, to get that finalized effect. So HDR works well on this kind of thing. It worked well for me for the upstairs, which made the white balance even more complicated because it had a lot more natural light, but that's an HDR. And I think I'll stop there before I go too far. Let me, questions? So Bill Martin did have his hand up. All right, I'll stop screen sharing.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really nice. Thank you. Learned a lot.
Thanks, Vance.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank
you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Hi.
Thanks, Vince. Good night.
Yeah, James.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Vince. Night, everybody. Or good
Night.
morning, everybody.
Good morning, Lee.
Good morning to you, Lee. See ya.
Night all. Good morning, Lee. And